Welcome to the Cloudless Mind podcast about neuroscience, non-duality, and change management. Introducing your hosts, Paul Smith and Scott Bird.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Cloudless Mind podcast. Let's start the second podcast with a fundamental conversation. It's always fascinating to address the most fundamental question, which is, who am I?
It looks like an easy question because you would normally refer to your name. You would say, I am Paul. But even Ramana Maharshi, a guru from India, he only had one question to all the people visiting him. Who are you? And that's a tricky question because you start with, okay, I'm Paul. And he's like, okay, but if you change your name, are you still you? And then you're like, yeah. Cool. Then who are you? And people say, well, I am my body. And he would be like, okay, then which part of your body are you? And that's a question no one thinks about. But if you take off your arms and you take off your legs, you are still you, you know. You can even take out some organs and replace them with machines. You would be still you. So if you look deeper, this is what Alan Watts would say. Eventually people say, who am I? I am something between my ears and behind my eyes. That's where we think this I is. Okay, then we look at neuroscience. Where is the part of the brain that is I? But now it seems that there is no puppet in your head. There's no I. But due to the functionality of the brain, the illusion of the I is being created.
Right.
But not during the whole day. And that's the interesting thing. If you are in flow, as we call it, then you're only aware, but not self-aware. So if you're doing sports, reading a book, making love, watching TV, at a lot of moments during the day, the self-awareness is switched off. And for instance, if you're watching a movie, you are only aware of the movie, but you don't think, I am sitting in the cinema watching a movie. It's only when a movie stops, you think like, oh, where did I leave my parking ticket?
Right.
It's even more interesting because up till the age of 1.5 years approximately, there's no self-awareness in the brain. So you've got these funny videos on YouTube where small children look in the mirror and they're like, who is this?
Right, just like a dog.
Exactly, yeah. And then they look behind the mirror to see where it is. So who you are is not such an easy question.
Yeah, well, yeah. And even further to that point, it's just not real. I mean, who you think you are is an illusion.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I'll talk about with in my work is it's like the head bowling pin, and if you knock this one bowling pin down at the top, this head pin, it's going to knock a whole lot of things down with it. It's going to have an effect that will take care of almost all problems, all types of things going on in your life where things, seem contracted, seem constrained, can seem where the experience of your life is what the Buddha might say is just suffering. With this realization about what you just spoke about, to really look into this question called, who am I, is one that if you could see it, might take care of just about all of your problems in life. But it's not an easy one.
They say the identification with the I is the starting point from all your suffering.
Yes.
And it starts with the identification with your body, the way you look, with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your actions, with your choices. Because it all looks like it is you doing it, which is, of course, you think that is true because that's how your brain is creating the world for you. You know, it's a like a magic trick from your brain, actually. But if you see through that illusion, all this tension and this overwhelm and stress, it can dissolve over time.
So I used to work on Wall Street, and I would, for the most part, it was like I described in it earlier in our first podcast. My experience of the world was from a place of like low level anxiety. And then, but my experience of everyone else was the same way. I mean, it was like I was in this field of anxiety that came around everybody's sort of, they're wrapped up in their sense of an I.
Yes.
And what ended up happening was, I got when I found so much relief from this discovery of deeply asking this question, this thing called anxiety just simply disappeared. I mean, literally disappeared. And so when I look back into my previous career, when I look back into my previous world and the previous environment, it's what really had me interested to bring this out into the world of business.
Yeah.
Is to be able to, but this isn't like a typical question that you're going to see, highly competitive, highly performing, successful business people ask, because they, there's a kind of an ego thing around that. So this question isn't just a question that I see or you see as sort of a philosophical and spiritual question. It's an incredibly utilitarian question.
Yeah, and it's now even, it's not some mysterious Indian philosophy anymore. It's just neuroscience. This is what every neuromarketer or neuroscientist is talking about. Like, there's no I in your brain. It's obvious now. What was written in the Upanishads like 600 years before Christ, which they couldn't have explained scientifically by then. Mm-hmm. It's now actually science-based. And it is the most fundamental question, I think. And it's a question hardly anyone asks. Huh? Who am I?
And mainly because in many ways, we're not encouraged to ask this. But, Paul, I think that it's worth mentioning right now, because this occurs to me when you're saying this, is that in this day and age, is more important to ask than it ever has been in the history of existence. Because what has happened is we've moved, and this isn't original, this is something that people are becoming aware of, is that for almost all of time, we humans didn't have access to I didn't have access to what was going on in your brain.
True.
I didn't have access. Like, only person that knew what was going on in the thoughts were you.
Yeah.
But now what's happened is that we're starting to find that us human beings, we have these patterns that can start to be detected by all this technology that's out there. So now it might not just be me that knows what's going on in my head, but with all this technology, they're actually asking the question too, who are you? And they're defining it in a certain way that they actually can manipulate and market to you. And I think that that's one of the big reasons why we've got so much suffering going on in the world right now, and especially in business.
Yeah, true. It's all these algorithms that just know how to trigger our unconscious part of the brain. We're not aware of it, but it just like Facebook just makes you a Facebook addict. They even register how we feel. What is your mood? And by the speed on which you pick up your phone or the music you listen on your phone, even the apparatus knows your mood. It's fascinating times, but I just totally understand why so many people are being stressed and overwhelmed these days.
Well, right, especially with the way technology is, and we'll go deeper into things like artificial intelligence and stuff in the future, because it really is important to know that if you don't take a good look at me and be able to have a deep understanding of this idea, others will.
Yes.
Others are actually taking advantage of this way that you see yourself. You're leaving footprints everywhere in the world, and they're looking deeper into you than you are, and they know you deeper.
Yeah, they say that those who own the data have the power.
Yeah, I've been really fascinated to see. You just mentioned it before, like on Facebook, they added the new emoticons. You now just don't like something. You can love it. You can do all the different things. They're getting even a deeper understanding of what emotion is going on any given moment. And you get to help them get more and more dialed into who you think you are and how you operate as kind of a machine.
Yeah.
And last night I just happened to be watching a movie called Ex Machina, I was recommended by someone else.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to see something really interesting, could be disturbing. My son was very disturbed. My 19-year-old son was disturbed. I actually found it very fascinating and very exciting.
Me too.
But it really does speak to this idea that, look, if you don't ask this question, others already have, and they know the answer in many ways. And so if you're not, you become like this marionette that, actually the puppeteer becomes these technology companies who really get these questions.
Yeah, it's even fascinating that on Facebook, with only 300 likes that you've given, then the algorithm knows you better than your own partner.
Yes.
With only 300 likes. It's fascinating. But if we go back to, let's say, the idea that this is you, it's so logical that this is what we think. Because ever since you were born, I mean, how many times have you heard the name Scott? Everyone will refer to you from a young age, you are Scott. So of course you believe in this. And especially if you're in a working environment where everyone is identified, you will just copy their behavior. And this is how we live in a society that is identified and struggling at the moment. I mean, look at the statistics. I mean, like in Holland, 50% of everyone's been overweight at the moment. I heard the latest statistics. 15.9% in the Netherlands has a burnout, and 33% is emotional unstable at the moment. So I think this message could liberate quite a few people.
And the reason that we formed this company together is to be able to go from the typical way of seeing the world, the way society tells you to see it, to this really super radical way of questioning life. And then, but bringing it into companies, because one of the things that we both see, and I'd love it if you'd speak a little bit about this, because the thing that really, I saw your show, one of your, what you do, I say a show, you actually have created an experience for audiences that get them to really understand this without them being without too much resistance coming in. That's one of your talents. And can you speak a little bit about that?
I try to keep it as simple as possible, which is absolutely possible with this message, because it is simple, but it's radical. And so I slowly build up everything that happens in people's head. So you first identify with this is me. And from that comes the second thought, but then I have to be good enough. And in order to be good enough, you act a little bit dominantly, or you start to please. But we also have the thought, I need to control everything. And because we believe we have full control, we need to have full control, life just does what it does. And things always go different from what you think. So people become frustrated. They have a lot of fear. They have a lot of guilt. So I slowly build up the whole bubble, the clouds as we call it, around this first simple concept of this is me. And then what I'm pointing at is also what we point at in our book, like first see through that illusion of the I, and then all the other clouds can start to dissolve.
Yeah, very efficiently. And if we look at it as it revolves around companies, I mean, if you were to really look at it from an objective point of view, companies really are control mechanisms. They come together to think that they can, first of all, the CEO thinks, okay, my work is to somewhat gain control over what's happening in the organization. And then everyone is oriented around this idea of control. And we're not saying that there is not some semblance of things going on, things happening, progress being made. The question is, who's doing it? Where is it originating from? And there's a question that will liberate and create a different, I'd say, energy in your company if you could see what we're pointing to.
So this is what you sometimes see with new startups, with like young, passionate people. They are not filled with all these clouds of fear or whatever. So they're totally spontaneous and creative. And that's such a different culture from sometimes those big organizations I see, with all people like having to operate in patterns, with control mechanisms, a lot of management, a lot of management by fear. To first liberate people from all this tension and these clouds is a good step to finally make the culture more spontaneous and flexible.
Well, yeah, and we'll spend a lot more time on this in future podcasts. But I think today this is a good place to end. We've just barely scratched the surface of what's possible in this initial conversation. If people care to go deeper into this, there's a lot out there if you're willing to look for it.
Yes.
And if you want to find out more about what we're up to, we did just write a book that's available on Amazon, and you can go to cloudlessmind.com to get a little bit more of our world. So with that in mind, we'll wrap it up today, and we will see you soon.